This video is for lesson 15.1, planning adjusting entries. We have two objectives. You need to be able to prepare an unadjusted trial balance, and then you also need to be able to adjust supplies and prepaid insurance. So some general ledger accounts need to be brought up to date before financial statements are prepared. So adjusting entries are going to be used to bring those general ledger accounts up to date. That is why we do adjusting entries. The first step in preparing any adjusting entry is to prepare a trial balance. A trial balance prepared before adjusting entries are posted is called an unadjusted trial balance. This is showing us an example of an unadjusted trial balance. Up here at the top, we do have our heading. Our heading always answers those three questions: who, what, and when. Notice our when on our unadjusted trial balance is going to be the specific date that we are putting in those balances. And then all we're going to do is we're going to write all of our account titles, and we are going to list our balances for those account titles. You will notice we do have some on here, like here we see our supplies expense accounts and our uncollectible accounts expense. They do not have a balance. However, we are still listing them on the unadjusted trial balance. Then once all of our accounts and balances are listed, we are going to single line rule. Remember, single line rule just means that we are totaling up those columns. We're going to label it as totals. We're going to add up our debit column. We're going to add up our credit column. We are going to make sure that our debit and our credit equal. Once they equal, we would double line rule, and that double line shows that those two numbers are equal. There are four questions that we're going to ask when we analyze adjustments for supplies. So our first question is going to be, what are the balances of the accounts being adjusted? What should the balances be for these accounts? What must be done to correct the account balances? And then what adjusting entries are going to be made? So what we're looking at first is going to be our supplies office. And we're going to kind of pretend that this is not there for right now. What we want to look at is, what is the balance? I'm going to go back to these, I'm going to go back to these four questions. We're going to go through these four questions when we're figuring out that adjustment. Okay. So I'm looking just at the supplies office, and this is the balance in that account at this point. So that is the balance. That's our first question. Our second question is, what should the balance be? And so this number here is what the balance should be. This is like, maybe I'm doing a physical account of my supplies in my office, and I see that even though my account says I have $4,500 worth of supplies, I actually only have $610 worth of supplies on hand. And so when I see that, that tells me that an adjustment needs to be made to that account. So my third question, I'm going to go back. My third question is, what must be done to correct that account balance? Well, if I see that my account shows this 4548.17 and it should be 610, I know that I need to decrease this account by this amount. The way that I found this amount is I'm subtracting these two numbers, and now I get this amount here, and I need to decrease that account by that amount. If I have a debit balance, to decrease that account, which is my fourth question, what do I need to do? I need to credit my supplies office by this amount, and then I always have to have a debit if I have a credit, so I'm going to debit my expense account, my supplies expense office. This is an expense of doing business. I'm going to use my supplies throughout the fiscal period, so I need to debit my expense account. We are doing the exact same thing for my supplies store. So again, first I'm going to look at what is the balance in the account. Then I'm going to look at what the balance should be. Then I'm going to look at what needs to be done. So I'm subtracting these two numbers, and that gives me this amount. I know I need to decrease supplies store by this amount. To decrease supply store, I need to credit it. If I credit it, I have to debit. This is my fourth question, and I'm going to debit my expense account. So I'm going to put it into my general journal like this. I'm going to put my date, I'm going to debit my expense accounts and I'm going to credit my supplies accounts. So we have two different supplies office, supplies store. So really this adjusting entry is kind of done twice for each account. Okay, next I'm looking at my prepaid insurance. I'm going to go through those same 4 questions again. Here's what my prepaid insurance looks like in the account for my balance. Here's what it should be. I now know that I need to decrease that account. I'm subtracting these 2 numbers to figure out how much I'm decreasing that account by. Since this is a debit balance, I need to decrease it with a credit. This is my 4th question. So I'm going to credit prepaid insurance. I have to have a debit. My debit is going to be to insurance expense. Sometimes I have students that want to say prepaid insurance expense but we don't have a prepaid insurance expense. It's simply insurance expense. This is the insurance that we've used throughout that fiscal period. Again, I'm going to record that into my general journal. So I have my date. I'm going to debit my expense account and I'm going to credit prepaid insurance. Up here, they're just showing me my unadjusted trial balance. My prepaid insurance here, they're showing me as $11,000. That's why we need to make that adjustment because it needs to be $2,800. Number 1, which adjusting entry is unique to a corporation? So federal income tax, we did not do this adjusting entry. We will at a later point, but a corporation will need to do an adjusting entry for federal income tax expense. What 4 questions are used to analyze the adjustment of an account? First, we look at what the balance of the account is being adjusted. Next, what should the balance be for that account? Number 3, what are we going to do to correct that account balance? And number 4, what is the adjustment? So number 3 is really figuring out, do we need to increase that account or decrease that account? And number 4 is looking at like the amount and what are we going to debit and what are we going to credit? Number 3, which accounts are used for the adjustment to office supplies? So when we make an adjustment to office supplies, what 2 accounts do we use? We are going to debit our supplies expense office and we would credit supplies office. One thing that helps me is when we are doing our adjustments, more than likely we are going to be debiting our expense accounts. Number 4, which accounts are used for the adjustment to prepaid insurance? We are going to debit our insurance expense and we're going to credit prepaid insurance. Okay, you can now go on to the 15-1 work together.